let's just fix a couple of the problems that I left in there. The nostril wing. Okay. Move brush, pull it in. As I mentioned, I want the nostril, I want the alar cartilage to grow at the expense of the nostril wing instead of growing them both. And that'll effectively make the mouth or the nose blockier as opposed to less pointed. Teeth penetration happening there. Let's go into the orbicularis oris, or the mouth, and just use move and move it out. Okay, anything else I want to change before we move forward? No, looks pretty clear to me what the job is now. So let's see how much trouble we get into when we remesh this. And remember, remeshing starts at the top subtool. You can turn that X off and then remesh. Okay, there we go. Let's take our remesh figure and let's see what we can do. So I'm going to go solo mode, and let's start by blocking out planes. So just a reminder, I'm in draw, my focal angle is 35 and aligned object is on. So in case you're looking at the way my profiles are working, that's important. Alright, so a couple of plane changes, a couple of very distinct planes that I'm going to always work on and that I just want to spend extra time on here. Okay, we're going to definitely be working with the line or this kind of plane break that the masseter makes. And so I'm going to be kind of trying to treat this entire masseter as one plane that's basically flowing backwards. Okay, there's a very clear plane change right here. You can kind of see it. This is such an amazing triangle right there. But what I do is just fill that in so it's all straight. It's all clean and simple. We could break it up a little bit more, but see right here where the zygomatic is, this is going to start to set up the infraorbital triangle, which is really not a triangle. It's kind of more of a rectangle. And that's of course going to be its own simple plane as well. So we could set this up a little bit more where this is its own rectangle as well. These are all the things we get to play with. So keep planes in mind as you're doing this. Also keep in mind that I did not just give you exact planes. Okay, there's some variation, and at the end of the day you want to start the investigatory process. You want to start to find these plane changes yourself. If you're like me, you learn by doing. Or I should say that more positively. If I'm like you, you learn by doing. I learn by doing. Something like that. Alright. Filling in. I'm using Trim Dynamic and pressing Alt. And I have Backface Masking on. If you've forgotten, Backface Masking is under Brush Palette, Auto Masking, Backface Masking. Okay, and then I'm just trying to make sure that I'm getting clear, clean planes. I want to make sure I get a plane from here to here to here. Okay, because this is the zygomatic, this is the depressor anguli, and that's the masseter, and then this is all just in between stuff. Okay, now let's round out that chin because we're going to be moving from the depressor anguli to the mentalis and the depressor labii. So for this one, I'm going to use clay, make sure it's not affecting the back side. Clay or Trim Dynamic will work. You'll choose the one that you're more comfortable with. You want to start making, especially at this point in the process. You want to start making these choices, and then unmaking them, and then changing your mind and remaking them. Okay. All right, pretty simple what I did, but it set us up fairly well. Let's fill in. I'm still using clay brush. Let's fill in that temporal line. Okay. Fill in this transition, frontal eminence, and then I'm going to smooth some of that out. That glabella got quite a hit. I'm not sure why it's dipping down there. I have to look. I must have missed something in the sculpt. So I'm just emphasizing the glabella and simplifying that. Down plane. Okay. Okay, let's start to get that eye using trim dynamic, and I'm just kind of running around in a circle in there. And that starts to set me up. Okay. Side plane of the nose. Oops. Okay. And we need to start to make some distinctions. But you cannot miss that that's a male head at this point. Let's get in there and do the nostrils. And then the nostril and the alar facial juncture, nasal labial fold, lips, corner of the eye, middle of the eye. Yeah, okay, we're doing okay, but start to point that down. Marionette line, and alar cartilage, lateral cartilage, nose, dip in. Okay. Just going to set up the up and down plane for the lips. It's a bit on the full lipped side of things, but that's okay for now. I'm also starting to set up that nasal labial fold so that this would start to be a little rounder or a little shallower. Less full, basically. Trim dynamic. Start to flatten that infraorbital triangle, but also be building it up. So finding the side plane of the nose and just trying to build a plane there. Of course, the way I build a plane is with trim dynamic. I'll flatten one section of the plane, press Alt, bring up another section of that plane. Okay, so still with trim dynamic. Okay, and I'm still on the lips, and I'm just now going to go in with trim dynamic to just establish that up and down plane. Yeah, from a distance that reads well. Okay, and there we go. Just a line I always make separates the lower lip quite well, I think, to just go in and dig that in. Last thing I think I'm really worried about with this guy is that nose. It's quite dominant here, so let's just see if I bring it in a little bit. It's either or. Could be brought in a little bit though. And then trim dynamic. Let's start to establish a couple of planes. Take off some of that chunkiness that we intentionally put onto that nose and really open those nostril wings. Smooth. Again, we're still fairly low res here. Can divide it one more time. And we absolutely have ourselves set up with all the elements that we need to go in and start to create a more masculine face. So come in, add a little bit more here. And yeah, let's just thin that out. That's the topology problem right there. Okay, and we have a basic structure for us to build on. Of course, we got to go in and sculpt these eyeballs and all of that stuff. But this is absolutely a firm foundation. Let me just get that eyelid. Age polish. Nasal jugulo, can never say that right. Okay, and we got a small indicator ready for us to put more. All right. So that, in a nutshell, is the process of kind of going or adjusting or yeah, well, just adjusting for a male head. Just to re-emphasize a couple of the elements that were important. It was relatively few items for you to keep track of. Not a ton of them. But what we had to do is focus on the glabella. It's probably the word I've said the most. Okay, sloped forehead. Okay, we really wanted this down plane of the glabella, but that's just part of the glabella. We really wanted to adjust the ramus and also the angle of the jaw. We adjusted the width of the mandible. We also adjusted the width of alar cartilage, the alar cartilage. Right, like a doctor, huh? We modified the width of the zygomatic bone. We kind of pulled that in. A female is going to tend to have a wider zygomatic, well, the zygomatic bones will be farther apart. That just emphasizes the eyes. And then we also just made sure that plane changes were distinct. So there's not a whole heck of a lot to adjust, but these are core elements. You want to make sure you write them down, make sure you got them. All right, hope you enjoyed, hope you found this useful.
For the neck, I'm going to start with the windpipe. And the windpipe is going to include a couple of different components. It's going to start a little bit behind the sternum and head up here to where the hyoid bone is going to be. It ends at the hyoid bone, comes down right there. So the windpipe, of course, it's the windpipe. You know, that's where we're breathing from. This is coming down to our lungs, all of that good stuff. But there's three components that I want to make sure you're aware of. Okay, one of them in the upper half is called the thyroid cartilage. Okay, and the thyroid cartilage is going to have a bit more of a V notch in a male, and it's going to be a lot less obvious in a female. So we're just going to kind of keep it a little bit on the low key. Now in the bottom half we have the thyroid gland down here. Okay, and that again is going to break a little bit. but not too much. It's relatively minor. And then we have the cricoid cartilage. And that's, I'm going to do that in red right up here. Let's identify these guys now. So let's do this in white. Hyoid bone. Okay. Thyroid cartilage. Hyoid bone going to be up there at the top. Thyroid gland down here at the bottom. And the cricoid cartilage. Right there on top. And of course now, as I mentioned, these are going to be different in the male than the female, mainly being the thyroid cartilage, which is also known as Adam's apple. So in our case, we still want to put it in there, because in a female you can still see a subtle shape in there, something that distinguishes it from just this flat line along the front. But it doesn't have that distinctive Adam's apple V-shaped notch. So how are we going to pull this one together? Well, my thought is we'll do it all really simple out of a cylinder, and we'll just sculpt it all together. So we'll start that off by going into, let's go all the way down to the bottom. And we're going to append some part, or we're going to duplicate some part, so that we can use Dynamesh tools, and in this case a curved tube. So let's just duplicate this bottom piece here. I'm going to select it and turn Dynamesh on. Okay, don't care about the subdivision levels, they're irrelevant to me. I might want to turn transparency on, see where that part is. Okay, it's down there. So we're going to turn group on so that we can actually delete that part later on. And then let's come into here and say curve tube. Symmetry needs to be on. And can we pull this out? Well, problem number one, you can't. We gotta move this into position. Let's turn perspective off. And we don't really care what these guys are doing or looking like or anything like that. So I'm just going to push them together. Alright. Then come in. Why don't we do this from a front? And straight up. Now we got to adjust our settings a little bit, because I want to use this as a line and I do not want bend on. And this is a little large of a draw size for that. So I'm going to go straight up. There we go. And then grab that end, rotate it, grab this end, pull it in. I'm going to adjust my draw size. Okay. Something like that. You want to be thinking about the angle of the neck. So grab some reference. Take a look at different necks. Julia Roberts, Rosario Dawson. Just take a look, long necks, and see how you want to model this afterwards. If your spine is in the way, push the spine out of the way. Sculpt it out of the way. We need to make sure that our aesthetics are having priority here. Naturally, you know, in the real world, the spine might have just crept forward. It's not going to be naturalistic there. We're going to cover all that up. So the key thing is that you get the relationship right, the size right, and the angle right. And then we can go from there. Notice also that I'm making sure to have a push. I don't want it to come all the way to the edge of that sternum. I want it to have a ledge, because then this ledge is going to also be imitated by the sternocleidomastoid as well. Okay, and we're taking that right to the hyoid bone. So I'm going to say about there. And pull it down. Inside and back. Alright, now it's Dynamesh, so you can be sculpting it a million different ways, but we can also just come in and insert these parts. So I'm going to go into Insert Sphere. Insert the thyroid gland. Okay, draw mode, or sorry, go into move mode, push that back. Alright, and now we can also use this really cool feature where you can use transpose to actually duplicate these parts. So press Control, click on that the middle dot. So I'm clicking right here on this middle dot while pressing Control and then dragging up. And so that duplicates it. Pretty nice. And now we might want to do that again. Control, click and drag down, but this time, this one, I'm going to squeeze. Yeah, about like that. That's going to be the cricoid cartilage. So that's going to be this little tiny sliver that sits on top of the thyroid gland. And now we can get in there and start to sculpt these guys. So let's turn this off, and you can go into solo mode if you want. So I press G. I don't need these strokes anymore. And let's kill subtools. Dynamesh is on. Control, click and drag, and there you go. Okay, we have separate groups. They look a little bit on the funny side. Let's increase our resolution. There we go. Alright, so we've got some blending. Let's make sure everything has its own poly group. There we go. And into Dynamesh. There. Now we were able to keep everything separate. One thing we forgot, that hyoid bone. So why don't we go into Move, Control click, and drag that part up. Solo mode is off temporarily. Okay. Chances are, though, I'm probably going to want that hyoid to be more like a hyoid. So let me just undo that. And let's go into solo mode here. And I really want to just get in and create it. Probably curved tubes is the one. I do need the bend function here, though. So, or not the bend, but just I need as line off. Okay, come from each side. Lower my draw size, reset that size. Okay, let's move that up. Move it forward. Okay, and there you go. Okay, so a couple of things to be aware of. There's actually a lot of polygons right on top of each other. Because of the way we're doing this, very loose and sloppy. But that's fine. If we go in and we actually convert this now, you can turn group off. Increase your resolution, of course. Increase the resolution, turn group off, go into Dynamesh. We're going to have a pretty nice shape. Something that we can kind of work with. But I'm going to turn this off. Let's get rid of these guys. We're going to just say delete hidden. It's very easy. There's no subdivision level, so we don't have to do anything. Okay, then come back in, set my resolution high, group is off, and Dynamesh. And then, just for the sake of it, I'm going to delete that stroke curve. And there I've got a basics for a throat. Something that we can be adjusting and making work with the rest of our muscles. And now we have also the hyoid bone.